Yeah, I think being up on time really helped him there, because Denis probably knew with best play he could hold it, but so hard with under 10 seconds to play down a pawn against Magnus Carlsen.
That's the name of the game. That's the name of the event, the Speed Chess Championship. It's obviously very relevant how much time you have on the clock. It's a weapon just like being up material is.
That's a tough break for Denis. He probably felt he's suffering the whole game. Magnus really did blunder. And sometimes you blunder, you can lose the game. That type of blunder, fortunately for Magnus, didn't cost him the game. Maybe just half a point with best play, but wasn't the biggest mistake.
Well, in this position, Eric, I couldn't help but notice it looks like we've got the same game, but if you flip the colors. Because this is actually the exact setup that we saw used previously by Magnus Carlsen. So kind of interesting to see a 100% flip. And what I'm used to is that bishop for black goes to e7 instead of d6, and that's a little bit because of this e5 push. We see e4, and Eric, this is the same idea that was used because of that loose g7 pawn, and in this case, the pawn's protected on e4 anyway.
Yeah, I'm not used to. I think Denis has definitely added some more openings to his repertoire since every year like this is used to some Catalans, some very solid d4. This is, changing things up, trying to take Magnus out of his comfort zone. But just immediately looking at this position with bishop e5, looking to trade off the dark squared bishops, that's a pretty comfortable
Magnus looks like he's literally in his comfort zone right now.
Oh yeah,
on
he's
the
leaning back.
Yeah, I don't know if he's really succeeded, but I think that was the intention. Trading off those dark squared bishops and playing e5. To be honest, I think this may have backfired from a practical perspective. We can see the evaluation bar, enjoys White's position, but I look at this a little bit differently, Eric. I see that White has that bishop on f3, not the best piece, of course, a very equal position, but I think from a practical perspective, you're happy to get e5, fix that e4 pawn on a light square, and look to play queen e7, kingside castle, keep it nice and safe.
Yeah, it's a long-term plan for White to figure out how to best deploy the light squared bishop, because you don't want it aimed at just your pawn on e4. Ideally, you have a rook or another piece defending it and trying to find a diagonal for the bishop. One idea, maybe, is eventually to play g3, bishop g2, and go for f4. But it's a bit more of a simplified position.
Long castle. Eric, what do you make of that move? I mean, it's actually matched immediately by White, which makes perfect sense, but I was surprised that Black didn't go kingside. It did not look that dangerous on the king side.
No, I think Magnus was just like, I'm just going to symmetrical castle queen side. Doesn't see much danger in this, which makes sense. Limited material. It's not like White's in a position to just storm on the queen side and loosen up Black's king. Really depends. Is White's pressure on e5 real? Can you actually turn that into, can you create a weakness? The knight looks good on c4, the queen looks good on c3, but what's the next thing? What's the next additional piece? If you just play natural moves, I guess there's an issue here, right? This knight on d7, when it moves, there's rook takes d8 and e5 falls. So is Denis just arguing, Black's running out of natural moves?
Exactly. Yeah, the knight on d7 can't move currently unless there's a well-calculated line that also wins the e4 pawn back. That does not look easy to do. And benefit for White is that while you've both castled, White's king has an escape square. So Black has to spend that extra time to maybe play a6. And I know you mentioned it's probably unlikely, but a good waiting move for White almost seems like a4, a5. Or maybe your idea of g3, bishop back to g2. And you could even consider h4 and bishop h3. A piercing pin on that long diagonal, Eric.
Yeah, the more I look at this position, I think I underestimated White's setup. It's hard for Magnus to trade off or challenge the position. Just this long-term pressure on e5. White, Black's not in a position to get a pawn on f6, and even if that happens, you have just some free space on the queen side to play a5, maybe hint at a6, grab a little bit of space. You also have the d file. It might be somewhat of a symmetrical position, but where White has all the advantages. A little bit more space, the d file. Like rook d2. If I'm just going to play simple chess, rook d2,
and
rook
Eric,
e to
I think
d1.
I can hear there's a "Let's Go Denis" chant live in the audience right now. We get a glimpse of that on the cam there. So they're rallying behind Denis also because of the situation in the match and with the time ticking down. They know, the fans know how important this game is, and you've seen how Denis has been playing it so far. You mentioned underestimating the position. I feel the same way. Perhaps Magnus also did.
Yeah, Magnus is definitely down a few moves in what looks to be a normal position, but knight c5. The question still is, how does white break through? And I said before, it doesn't seem like you should attack on the queen side, but Magnus is just a couple moves away from maybe getting a setup. Knight to e6, rook to d8.
Yep.
So right now, white is ahead in development, but that's not permanent.
And the move c6 for Magnus to kick that rook out of d5 is not a desirable move. You give up the b6 square, you give up the d6 square. So he's looking to hold steady, and while this gives up d7, it's only momentary. Because that knight can jump into the d4 square, it's not like that rook's staying on d7 forever.
Definitely not. And I want to say a long-term plan, if white doesn't get pressure, look for Magnus to maybe consider h4 as a move.
Yep.
Fix these pawns. The knight will be able to slide into f4 and put long-term pressure on g2. Right now, though, Magnus has to find a safe place for the queen.
Yeah. No, it's important that you mentioned that.
I might play h4 as
I was
white.
going to say, yeah, white might want to play h4 just to prevent that, because that's a long-term problem. If you don't make something happen as white in the middle game here, black plays h4, knight f4, and you could be in some trouble in some of those endgames, even with the kings and pawns.
I want to play h4, Mon, but there's rook d8. And again, too many trades. There's no edge for white if you allow too many trades.
It feels like it's disappearing slowly. Magnus is, he's still kind of in his chair looking comfortable. I think he's had to do more work than he expected, but what seemed like, tons of pressure in the position has turned into the e5 pawn fully defended, the knight on e6 heading to f4, d4, and rook d8 supported by the queen, the knight. I mean, what do you do other than acquiesce to all these trades?
I guess with knight e3, the knight's good on d5 in some positions without the rooks. You can target f6, but also frees up the queen for this queen c4 move. And the point is just to prevent Magnus from being able to play rook d7, trade off the rooks, and bring another rook behind.
That's right. Now,
wow, there's a line here.
No.
You see these arrows, Amon.
Oh,
that's
my
easy to
goodness.
miss.
Okay, yeah, I was about to say, that is crazy. Queen takes e6, everybody. Would have been a pure sacrifice. And we have to show that, Eric, on the board. King to a7. And the problem is if you play c6 in a position like this, there's a mating net on a8 with knight b6, with knight c7. This is an unbelievable concept, and honestly, no wonder it wasn't spotted.
It's a nasty concept, and we can go even further. Like b5, you find rook a8 check.
Oh my goodness.
Rook takes a6. Very hard to find.
That's insane.
People will analyze that after the match, but that was a remarkable chance.
And back to the live position here. That would have been a crazy way for this game to end. But honestly, much more expected is what we see on the board here. In terms of the pawn structure, h4 was played by white. Bit of an achievement there. But Eric, at this point, it doesn't feel like a position that Magnus is going to lose anymore.
No, I don't think he's in any trouble. And Denis is the type of player, if the position's equal, he's generally okay with the draw. I mean, there's still time in the match. He doesn't have to go for a win here, and this is in the position to do so.
Yep.
There's no real edge for white, no weak pawns.
That's right.
Technically e5.
Well, I was going to say, it'd be interesting. Knight c4 actually wins the e5 pawn outright, but then knight f4 wins g2, and I don't think you're trying to take on that type of risk.
Yeah, so it's true. e5 is the weakness, but Magnus is baiting it, it seems like.
Yep, exactly, because at this point, after king to f2, now you have to think about the e5 pawn, but I think that was the moment. Are we going to see king c5 and maybe play for something more? No, king e6, of course. Magnus with the lead in the match. No need to do anything crazy.
If they keep playing this on, though, something could happen.
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
b7 could be weak. Knight a4, knight c5 is an idea. Magnus moving his knight back is an accomplishment for white. You don't want to have to defend g2 for the rest of the game.
Yep. If you play g3, that's not necessarily the best situation, because then you're tethered to that tension. If you capture on h4, you hand an outside pass pawn over to Magnus. So I don't think you want to play g3, which is why we might sort of see the deadlock here with maybe king e3 and king e7.
But you have to be careful if you just keep pushing your pawns. At some point, Magnus might switch and move his king over to the queen side, and we'd start looking at pawn races.
Exactly. This exchange right here locks up the queen side completely, and g4 solidifies that despite the amazing outside pass pawn, which is protected on h4, by the way. There's simply no progress for the kings, and that game ends in a draw. Look at that match.